Hey, Facebook world, kitchen stewardship. Katie Kimball here, and today we are talking about clutter. I know that this is something that many of us deal with, especially those with kids, those of us who are spending a ton of time in the kitchen. I feel like I pick up and move things around the house all day, and it never gets any better. I know there are probably some of you out there who have beautifully clean houses and you do not deal with this because that's your personality. So you can probably stop watching because this is not the Facebook Live for you. But I'm super excited to have Dana White on today with me. And I think she'll be able to be coming in. That didn't work the way I expected it to. Well, we'll get her in some way. But Dana is from the blog of Slob Comes Clean. And what I love about her is that she was just a normal person. Like, she's not this like perfect KonMari. I know everything about organizing and it comes really naturally to me. It did not come naturally to Dana all the time, which makes her a really relatable person to listen to. It means that she's kind of like me. And so if she has met success in the decluttering and organizing, maybe I can too. So I'm just working on getting her in. But of course, we totally tested this 5 minutes ago. And what do you know? The program is acting a little bit differently now that we're trying to do live. So that's bizarre to me because I've done this before. And I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, if you can hear me, Dana, I just sent you an email invite, so that might work, I hope. I don't have the same functionality as I did literally 5 minutes ago. It's telling me I have not available for Facebook events. Anyway, we're talking about clutter, and I gotta tell you, I know it looks like pretty decent behind me. That's like seriously the cleanest shelf in the house, but everything that you can't see literally between me and the computer is like piles, and there's a clipboard. Like, it's ridiculous. I am such a piles person. I just cannot seem to solve that problem at all. In fact, yesterday it was really windy here, and like, we wanted the windows open because it's finally nice. We live in Michigan. We've been cooped up for 6 months, and the wind was blowing so much, it was blowing my piles around. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose like a check, or I'm going to lose a bill, or I'm going to lose, God forbid, one of my 4 to-do lists. And then life would seriously fall apart, because if it is not written down, there is nothing good happening with the to-do list. So I'm really excited to hear kind of some of Dana's tips. I would direct you to check out her newest book. It's called Decluttering at the Speed of Life, Winning Your Never-Ending Battle with Stuff. So again, super, super cool topic and title. And Dana is very, very real life, very realistic. And it is so real life that we are having tech trouble and can't even get her onto the Facebook Live. So bizarre. It should have been way easier than this. But it's not. She might be coming in. She might be coming in now. I think we're winning. So here we go. We're welcoming Dana White from A Slob Comes Clean,
Hi.
author of Decluttering at the Speed of Life. Hi. Sorry that worked differently because it was live. Go figure.
Well, it was a whole new Facebook. Like, it was a whole different thing when it was going on to Facebook. And then I had to remember my Facebook password because I had to use a different browser to get it to work. So that's, yeah.
Well, we are lucky that you're here at all.
I'm lucky. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. It's always fun to talk to like real life people who are doing really cool things, like publishing books about, it sounds like, to me, from what I've read of your stuff, it sounds like this used to be your weakness and now you're an expert in it. So you got to tell me how that happened.
So let's just be clear that it will always be my weakness. I mean, this is my natural struggle. I mean, I was born the opposite of naturally organized. Mm-hmm. So this is something that I have to struggle with my entire life. But yeah, so basically back in 2009, I wanted to start blogging because I wanted to be a writer. But my house was a total disaster, and I just knew it was going to be one more thing to take my focus away from my home. And so I tried to get my house under control, couldn't do it, and grew more frustrated because now instead of just all the right reasons, to get my house under control, I now had this other motivation that I really wanted to write. And so in a moment of just total frustration and prayer, I started this anonymous practice blog called A Slob Comes Clean, thinking that I would do that for a couple of months. And yeah, here we are. It's 2018. So
that was your practice
blog.
blog.
It was. So, I mean, it was never intended to be my real blog. I didn't even tell my husband what I was doing. Because it just didn't make any sense. Like, if you would have told me then that I would write books on this subject, I would have just laughed and laughed. But here we are. And the main thing I've realized is, for one, like I already said, this is a legitimate struggle because my brain works differently from the brains of people whose homes are naturally organized. So I have strengths. This is my weakness. This is not my strength at all. But through figuring things out and through writing about it, I found that there are a lot of other people who struggle the same way that I did. And that going through this process for myself and putting it into words and putting it into actual strategies is helpful for other people, that feel completely overwhelmed. Like, why does my house consistently become a disaster? And it feels like nobody else's house is that way. And that's actually not true. We just don't let people in unless it's clean. Usually.
Yeah, we take pictures of the happy corner.
That's right. Exactly. So yeah, I mean, that's where I am now. And, it took a long time for me to accept that I really had something of value to share. And yet, once I realized, okay, I cannot tell anybody how to have a perfect house. Like, that's not my job. I'm never going to do that. But I can tell someone how to go from, I don't get this, I'm completely overwhelmed, to you can totally do this. Like, these are the basics. I just had an email from somebody yesterday, and they're like, thank you for being willing to explain the things that some people don't feel need to be explained. And that was
like
me.
Professional organizers, they're just ordered that way already. And I feel like they come into my house and they'd be like, well, you just do this, this, and this. And I'm like, but it won't stay. It won't work for more than 2 days. Like, I'd spend 2 days organizing and 2 days feeling good about it, and then it would all fall apart.
Right. And so then I would feel like a failure, because most traditional organizing advice is written by organized people. Their brains work differently than mine. And I was like, y'all have no idea my real starting place, or my actual, like you just said, the actual maintaining of things. Because my mom would come in and she would get it perfectly organized, and then it would go back to being a disaster. And I was like, okay, well, obviously this is never going to work. I'm completely hopeless. And so I had to figure out what does work for me and my specific, style and brain type and all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, that's cool. So in those early days, so you literally started a blog about cleaning up your house and you, at first, what I'm hearing is at first you were like, when I get my house clean, I get to start a blog. And you couldn't do it. So you started a blog about getting your house clean. Did that,
anonymous.
Did that like
totally
motivate?
Anonymous.
So what? Funny. Did that motivate you? Like, did the act of sharing help you at all?
It did. Well, in the beginning, nobody was reading it. And because I wanted to blog, like that was my ultimate desire, I was using this as a way to learn about blogging. So I was, in 2009, we didn't call it traffic building or whatever we call it now, but I was paying attention to how people were growing their blogs, and I was doing that kind of stuff. It used to be link parties that you would participate in. And so I would do that kind of stuff. But it was this weird, like, I want someone to read it, but I'll absolutely die. And, if anybody I knew ever read it, so I was not out there pushing it, but I did, obviously I was wanting to blog. And so I was wanting to do this. And the motivation was the self-accountability more than anything, since nobody was reading it necessarily in the beginning. Sure. And just that a way to process things, because that's, I'm a creative type. I have, writing was what I wanted to do. And so processing my own, what I was doing, by actually writing it down, what I was not doing, identifying my own excuses and finding ways to break through those, trying to figure out why is this that shouldn't be that hard, so hard for me, and working through that through writing, that helped me a lot.
That's wonderful. So for those of us whose brains are a little bit like yours and we're not born organized, our houses, like any organizational system, at least, I mean, I'm speaking, this is my brain at least, any organizational system feels like a great idea and never works. So what are some first steps? I mean, your new book is called Decluttering at the Speed of Life. And that it kind of makes me think of like the whole KonMari system. And I read KonMari and I'm like, she is not my people. Like she says, you need to do 10 minutes of something when you walk in the door. I'm like, I walk in the door and I'm 2 minutes behind already. Like there's no way that a mom, even an organized mom, can get 10 minutes of whatever to keep your house organized. So like, we just don't think in the same brain, but decluttering is still where she starts. Is that the necessary first step to get rid of some stuff?
Well, okay. So my first book was called How to Manage Your Home Without Losing Your Mind. And that one, if you are completely overwhelmed, like just, it's like we're bordering on hoarders here, you know, I mean, that kind of thing. That's where I would start, because I started with habits. So it's like habits and decluttering, because here's the thing. You just said, what you said is key right here, which is the systems sound really good. And my deal was, I would think I have got to get organized. I would look around my house and be like, obviously, my problem is I'm not organized. And so because I'm a project kind of person, I like to plan things out, implement them, see them through to the end, all that kind of stuff. I would come up with a plan. And that was way more fun than actually, you know, working in my house.
Doing the plan. Yes. I love lists.
And by the time I was done writing this plan, all that energy I had about, I'm going to change my life today, you know, that was gone. And so in the beginning, I worked on habits. I was like, I don't know what to do. Every system, every method I've ever tried has failed for me. So I'm just going to do the dishes. And so I just started on like daily things, and that made a huge impact. But at the same time, totally equally important, but you can't have one without the other, is decluttering. And so this book is all about decluttering, which is a much more universal issue. I mean, everybody, as long as you're alive, is going to need to declutter, because new stuff is going to come into your house and old stuff has to go out. You're constantly moving through phases of life. So for me, like the whole title of Decluttering at the Speed of Life is what you were talking about, you know, like what's my actual real life? And I have not read KonMari. I'm just going to say that, because it was starting to be super popular when I was writing my first book. And I was like, I can't read that because I don't want to, you know, accidentally, whatever, but we're going for the same goal here. So the key is like, if that works for you, that's exactly what you need to do. But if it doesn't work for you, you have to find something that does, which is where I come in. So I'm all about, you know, finding something that allows me, in the midst of being a busy mom and a business owner and a book writer and all that kind of stuff, to actually make progress, you know, which for me means never putting myself in a situation where I've made myself worse off than I was before. So like most people will say, because it is what happens if you, you know, declutter the traditional way, that you end up with a bigger mess before you know, anything gets better. It has to get worse before it gets better. Well, that kind of stuff would happen to me too. And it would make me not want to get started the next time, because I was like, well, I never have time to actually finish anything, because, you know, I've got 3 kids. I'm more than normally distractible anyway. So, you know,
I know, I say like, if I leave this room, I might never come back. So I sometimes I feel like I'm lazy. I'm like, no, I cannot go get a pen 10 feet away. That is another room. And if I leave this project, it may never get finished. So like, I feel you on that.
Exactly. But you don't have that option when you're a mother, or most women just in general. You know, life happens and you have to step away. So I had to come up with strategies that let me only make progress and never put myself in a situation where I end up, you know, worse off than I was before.
Yeah. So decluttering is not a project then. It's not like take everything out of the closet. So what is it? Redefine it for me, please.
So I have a 5-step system that, you know, I came up with over the last, well, I guess when I was writing the book, it had been about 7 or 8 years or something, you know. So this is something that I developed it from decluttering my own house. Like there's no theory, because the theory is you should be able to do this, 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 and this, and it all works out perfectly. But then you put that into reality and life happens and it doesn't always work out. So I have a 5-step process, and with each of the steps, I'm only making progress. So like my first step is grab a black trash bag. It needs to be black so the people in my family can't see what I'm putting in it, you know.
I get it.
Yeah. So grab a black trash bag and just start throwing away trash on what either in a general space or on that pile or in that closet or in that drawer, whatever. And the goal there is to start to reduce the overall volume of mess, because I'm overwhelmed looking at this, knowing that there's got to be something in there that's important.
Right.
And when there's a pile or a drawer and I know there's important stuff in there, then everything in there feels important. And it feels like I'm going to be forced to make these really difficult decisions. And instead I'm saying, no, I'm not worrying about that yet. I'm just going to throw away trash. And so as I do that, the overall mess reduces. And then my brain goes, oh, I see progress. Okay. You know, and so I do that and I'm only making progress, because if I step away, I've just thrown away trash and the space looks better than it did before. And so, you know, I've been successful. So then I move on after that through the steps. And so the next thing is the easiest, or the easy stuff, which is anything that has an established home somewhere else in the house. It's just not there for whatever reason. You know, I'm not going to beat myself up over why it's not there. I'm just going to say, okay, what in here do I not even have to ask myself any decluttering questions or analyze or anything? It's just, oh yeah, this goes there, and I go take it there. And then, you know, that again is reducing the overall volume of the mess. And then I move into my 2 decluttering questions, which allow me to make a final decision about everything that comes out. So I don't pull everything out.
Okay.
Because that's where I would get in trouble. I would pull everything out, life would happen, and then I would come back and that mess was outside the space I was decluttering in the first place. And now it was mixing in with everything else and making my whole house overwhelming. And so I just, one item at a time. My questions are, if I needed this item, where would I look for it first? And the key is would, not should. I'm not making any organizing decisions here. I'm just decluttering. And I'm saying, okay, where would I actually go first if I needed this? And then I take it there right now, instead of putting it in a keep box. Like I do not do keep boxes, because I have keep boxes in my garage from before we moved here like 12 years ago. You know, I mean, keep boxes are just procrastination boxes. That's all they are, because I don't have to make a final decision. I'm like, oh, well, I know I like this item, so I'm just going to put it in the keep box. But it doesn't actually do anything, you know? And so then it just sits there, and that keep box is overwhelming to me. So instead, it's where would I look for this? I go ahead and take it there, even though it feels like it's not as efficient. Whenever I get distracted because I'm decluttering at the speed of real life, I've only made progress, because there's never like little piles of all these things I'm going to, you know, go take through the house later, because life would happen. I would step away. I would come back and I couldn't remember what all those piles that I was sure I would always remember what they were.
Or the children are using them.
That's right. And again, it's outside of that space. And so I've made a bigger mess and frustrates myself more, you know. So I moved through that. My second decluttering question is, if I needed this, would it ever occur to me that I already had one? Which is really hard for a super frugal person, because that's the reason I had so much clutter, is I would collect things thinking I might need this someday. And then I would forget that I had it, because I had so much stuff in my house that, you know, when I made the conscious decision, if I truly would never have even looked for it, I either would have gone without and been perfectly fine, or if I actually needed it, I would have gone to the store, because it would never have occurred to me that I had one. And, you know, if I didn't remember it, but I had an answer to question number 1, well, then it's already taken care of, you know. But if I really could not answer the first question, then I have to be honest with myself and say, okay, if I had to replace this item, possibly, which usually it's about a 10% chance that I'll have to replace it, that money that I would pay for that in the future, I'm going to view that as money that I'm paying for a clear and decluttered and usable space for this amount of time. So does that make sense?
Great. Yeah, those are very honest questions. And yeah, being honest with yourself is always the hardest part. We had an incident a couple of weeks ago where a CFL light bulb, the curly kind that has mercury in it, was broken all over toys and books and stuff, tons. Yeah. And so we took it all outside to air out while we figured out what was safe. And I thought, like, at first we thought we'd have to throw everything away. Everything everyone was wearing, carpet, bedspreads, like everything in the room. Because the internet has this wonderful way of saying, well, either it's fine in 4 hours with air and fans or throw everything away. Oh, great. We get to make a judgment call. So we literally thought we were
life and death judgment call. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we thought, well, we're going to have to get rid of like something. Like there was a box of books that was kind of open. The top was open and I found like 3 or 4 pieces of glass and like glass dust in there. I said, nope, this box has to go. Like this box definitely has to go. And I'm holding it in my arms to take it to the trash. And I'm like, I like to call myself I'd like to be a minimalist. That's my goal, right? I'd like to have less stuff. And I say to the kids all the time, like, put it away or throw it away. Like, I'll throw it away for you if you can't pick it up. And I sound so mean, but I think I'm being honest. I couldn't do it. Like my gut, just the pit of my gut. I was like, these are books. Like I can't I can't do this. I guess I'm apparently a fraud. I only talk the talk that I actually want to get rid of stuff. Like maybe I don't want to get rid of stuff. So that was a tough realization of like, it's still sitting on our porch because I can't bring it back in and I can't get rid of it yet.
It's hard. And it's such a real thing. And what you're saying there is exactly what my problem was, is I would look at each item and I would want to make a value decision on it. Like my question was, do I love it? Does it have value? Does it have purpose? Well, as somebody who's super creative and loves to see the value and the purpose in things that other people don't, because I'm such a nice person, but I really do. Like I can tell you, if you ask me, does this have value? I'm going to be like, well, yeah. And I can list off reasons why it does. So I personally had to remove the emotions from the process because that did not work for me. I mean, if I was going to base my decluttering on emotions, I was going to keep everything and my house was a disaster and I could not do that. So my steps take the emotion out of it. So like your question, you're talking about, I want to be a minimalist. Well, a minimalist is making value decisions, right? I mean, like, does this actually have a purpose in my life? Is this something that, I absolutely need or whatever? Can I get by without it? But instead for me, it came down to what I call the container concept. So this is everything for me. And it's one of those things where when I figured it out, I was like, seriously, how did I not know this? And like, does anybody, this is one of those, like as you're blogging and early in the time, I'm like, I bet you everybody else in the whole entire world understands this. And I just didn't. And instead it's turned into one of those things that other people are like, oh my goodness, thank you. So here's what it comes down to. Containers, contrary to what I thought containers were for putting things in because that's what organized people did. Yeah. Instead, I have to view them because their actual real purpose to make them work the way that organized people make them work is that they contain. So they're limits to things. And so when I view containers that way, I don't have to make value decisions anymore. Instead, I say, okay, here's the space that I have available for this item, which could be a basket or a bucket, or it could be a shelf. It could be an entire, a cabinet, a drawer, an entire room. I now view my entire house as a container, as a limit. Okay. And so when I look at it that way, I say, okay, so this bucket right here, if I'm putting crayons in there, I'm going to put my favorite ones in there first. And then when it's full, I'm free to non-emotionally decide that the other ones can go because I know that this is the limit. It's not me. It's the container, that's the nice person in me that has to have that like out in this,
It's their fault.
Yeah, it's not you, crayon. It's the container. Sorry. But, it allows me to have that limit and go, this is the reality. It's not emotion based. It's just the reality. It's not that these crayons over here can't be used because they totally can, but this is the actual physical space that's available for this item. And when I started viewing containers in that way, it freed me from the emotions of making a decision. Okay. Now, would it help in your situation? Probably not, because that is a unique emotional decision. But if you start to look at it and go, okay, we needed to get rid of books anyway. Okay, I can get rid of those or whatever. But in almost every situation, the container concept allows me to actually live within the spaces that I have in my home. And once I did that, my house didn't feel too small anymore. You know, I mean, I was like, okay, you know, and it just freed me to get rid of things and to realize anything new that comes in my house, there has to be space for it, which means something old has to leave. And that's how I can maintain that decluttering progress. And, you know, I'll have professional organizers who read my stuff and they'll email me and say, I did not know that my clients did not understand this concept, but now I finally understand why it was like I was saying this and they weren't understanding it. And it's like that whole containers are meant to be limits, and it's, you know, space is not infinite.
Yeah.
I brought
so we
into
don't
my
need
house.
we don't need more containers because we have too much clutter.
Right.
We need less clutter to fit our
We just need
containers.
to declutter, which is my big thing. I'm like, don't get organized, just declutter. You know, getting organized meant finding little places for things. But then because of my personality, I was not good at always putting every little thing back. And so it was just constantly, I'd get organized, it would go back to disaster. Try to get organized, go back to disaster. And instead, just getting rid of stuff down to the point where it's only the stuff that fits well. And actually, I need it, you know, because then I make value decisions according to, is this container worthy as compared to this other thing?
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. How do you do this with kids though? Because so I have 4 kids, and number 3, his room was always the best for a while because he was like the youngest. He had the least stuff because we started saying, oh my gosh, please don't buy more toys. Like, he's got an older brother. He has everything he could possibly need. So as far as stuff that was like super his, he had very little. He had one like bookshelf and some baskets in his room, and I always felt like his room was tolerable. Now we've had a few holidays, and he gets these toys that, like, again, they really kind of don't fit on the shelves. But how do you teach a child one in, one out, like to get rid of stuff? That's really challenging.
So the container concept works really well with me, and it works really well with children as well. I don't know what that says about me, but so it ultimately comes down to, this is the space that we have. Put your favorite stuff in it first, which is like actually their favorite stuff, not what I wish was their favorite stuff, but actually saying, this is the space available. So it's not mama that's making this decision about, you know, you want to keep this? Why would you want to keep this? You know, it's like, okay, well, if it can fit in the container, great. And then because that's such a visual thing, it really does work well with kids. So anytime that they bring something new in, that's awesome. But what are you going to get rid of to make space on the container? So instead of using the term one in, one out, which I had heard that term before, and I had no idea what it meant. So you don't have to explain the container concept to them. But instead, as you declutter down to the point where everything fits, okay, with a child, it does often work best to clear it off and say, fill it with your favorite stuff first. Right. You know, I try to never pull everything out because that does not work well for me and my distractible personality. But with kids, you know, fill it with your favorite stuff first, and that's fun. I mean, it's fun to pick out your favorite things, and it will naturally sort out what they don't love as much. And then when they find something, oh, but I want to put this on there. The answer is yes. Awesome. Absolutely, you can. But what are you willing to get rid of to make space for that? So see how it's non-emotional and not judgment-based, and it eliminates the power struggles that often happen when you're decluttering with other people, because it's all the container. That's all it is. You know, it's all the bookshelf. It's all the, you know, whatever thing that you have that's the space that limits the number of stuffed animals or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. Gosh, that's so interesting. I told my daughter at one point that that's what I was going to do. I said, I'm taking everything out of your room, and if you care about it, you can take it back in one at a time. And she like pled and negotiated that she was going to do one zone at a time. And it was probably a bad choice on my part because it would have been better the other way. But she was so adamant that was, you know, going to like tear her heart out. And I thought, well, I've got to teach her to like ask questions and, you know, create a plan for herself too. I said, well, you have to make a schedule. Like, you can't, if you get behind one day, I'm going through, you know, So it took her like 2 weeks, and it did look good for a while, but I still think there's probably too much in there. It just comes out that their container is their whole room.
Well, it is. And I don't do the pull everything out just because it just never ends well for us, you know. And there's a chapter in my book. So one of my sections is working through the process with different people in your lives and working with your kids and moving through the just decluttering process with them so that they can go space by space so that because it is overwhelming. I mean, it's just for the person who already struggles with clutter to pull everything out is just like completely overwhelming. So to go space by space, working through the process, the 5-step process, and, you know, accepting the limits of this space and then this space within the room tends to work much better for my personality type and for children.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's how simplified I have to make things.
Yeah, let's close out with the 5 steps. So I see which ones I remember. Start with the black trash bag, get rid of the trash, then put anything away that's just out of place that goes somewhere else.
Yeah, the easy stuff that already has an established home. The third step, which I did not mention, is declutter. And I put that in there just because there's always declutter. Like, seriously, why? You know, that doesn't deserve, it's not trash, but it automatically goes in the donate box. You know, like it's just, it's not worth all that. But it needs to be a step because sometimes I would overcomplicate things and be like, okay, I'm asking myself the questions on something that I don't need to ask myself questions about. It's just easy. And then the 4th step is the 2 decluttering questions. And then the last step is implementing the container concept with make it fit. And I have a process for how to do that if it's overwhelming to you. But
Nice. That's awesome. I do think that would work for someone like me. And then it's always that maintenance, right? Like when I get the one new thing and I'm not in decluttering mode, just jam it in there.
Right.
But then you hit your point where you're like, oh, it's too jammy. It needs to be taken care of. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so very much, Dana. You guys, you can find Dana's book on Amazon at Decluttering at the Speed of Life. And I'll make sure after this, I'll edit and get a link in the description of the Facebook Live. And then Dana herself is at A Slob Comes Clean, not anonymous anymore, Dana White.
No.
Is there anywhere else people should be tracking you down and following you?
Well, you can find me everywhere there. I do have a podcast that comes out every week. So I just search A Slob Comes Clean in iTunes or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. So
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Congratulations on the new book. And it's just very exciting.
Thank you.
All right.